Okay, we're still wanting to use identities, but the instructions this time doesn't specifically say use Pythagorean identities. So that opens it up for me to be able to use the ratio identities and also the reciprocal identities. So I'm given cosine, and I have got to find the rest of them. So I'm not going to do this in, actually the order that we've learned them in. We'll just kind of start with the easiest and go from there. The easiest straight off would be to go straight to secant, because secant is always the reciprocal of cosine. So if you take negative 1/3 and flip it, then you get -3. So taking a reciprocal does not cause your sign to change. If it's positive, it'll stay positive. Negative will stay negative. So I know that that's going to be -3 without me even worrying about the information that I'm given over here about my quadrants. Okay. From here, I don't know, let's go to sine. So actually, to find sine, I am going to go to the Pythagorean identity. Okay, similar to the one that we used earlier, because I do know cosine, so I can take this value and substitute it in. Of course, we'll decide plus minus in just a second. Okay, so I would have the square root of 1 minus 1/9, which will give me the square root of 8/9. I need to simplify that, but let's go back and do our positive negative before I go any further with this. Okay, you're told that theta is not in the second quadrant. Okay, so that means it's either going to have to be first quadrant, third quadrant, or fourth quadrant. Well, I know it's not first quadrant because everything has to be positive in the first quadrant, and these two here are already negative, so that immediately rules out quadrant 1. So now we're down to 3 and 4. Okay, now it's going to have to be quadrant 3, because since these are negative, if I've got it narrowed down between 3 and 4, if you're in the fourth quadrant, these have to be positive if you're in the fourth quadrant, but these will be negative in your third quadrant. So just the fact that you know you're not in the second quadrant and knowing the fact that these are negative, when I go to make my decision whether things need to be positive or negative, I have figured out that my angle is in the third quadrant. So I need to do everything based on figuring out from the third quadrant. Okay, so let me come back here real quick. If we figured out that we're in the third quadrant, sine is going to be negative. So let's come back and put negative signs in front of each of these. All right, so you're going to need to take the square root of 8, which will simplify to be 2 square root 2, and then the square root of 9 will give you 3. Okay, now from here, the easiest thing to do next would be to get cosecant, because, it's supposed to be a C, because cosecant is always the reciprocal of sine, so we just need to take our sine value and flip it. So that'll be -3 over 2 square root 2. So now we're down to just tangent and cotangent. Okay, let me come back up here and let's work on tangent. I'm going to go to the ratio identity. The ratio states that tangent is sine over cosine. Okay, we know that sine, that's what I found over here, so that's going to be -2 square root 2 over 3, and then I divide that by cosine, which is -1 over 3. Now, simplifying this. Now, remember what I showed you earlier? Let's multiply the ones on the outside. So if I do 2 square root 2 times 3, that's going to give me 6 square root 2. And then if I multiply the ones that I have in the middle, 1 times 3 is 3. Now I didn't bother with the fact that they were negative at the time, because this is a negative divided by a negative. I know my result's going to be positive. Okay. And now you can reduce the 6 and the 3. So your final answer here would be 2 square root 2. Now remember, we're in the third quadrant. This coming out positive should make sense because tangent is going to be positive in your third quadrant. Now that I know tangent, then I can come up with cotangent, because cotangent is just the reciprocal of tangent. So this would be 1 over 2 square root 2. So as you go through and find those, just stick to using one of those identities.